Welcome, agents, to MASKast 64 and the 9th episode review in our Season 5 stretch of episodes 41 to 50 of the Mobile Armored Strike Command animated series. Coming up on this podcast, we'll examine episode 49, Follow the Rainbow, which will include our normal play-by-play commentary, along with audio clips mixed in from the actual episode. We'll be giving our opinions and ratings using our 1 to 5 scale system at the dramatic halfway point and at the finale of the episode. After we've completed our reviews, we'll read back listener reviews and the results from our poll found at agentsofmask.com. If you'd like to participate in these review podcasts, just visit our website and look for the MASKast assignment in the right-hand column. Follow the Rainbow was originally broadcast on December 5th, 1985 in the United States and features V.E.N.O.M going to Ireland to find the lost treasure of High King Brian Boru at the end of the rainbow. It's up to M.A.S.K and new agents Julio Lopez and Calhoun Burns to stop them. I'm Jason, one of your hosts of MASKast, and with me as always is my longtime friend and fellow co-host, the Scrooge McDuck to my launchpad McQuack. Wyatt, is your life like a hurricane right now?
It is. My money bank has needs a shiny dime.
Well, have you heard they're bringing back DuckTales this year?
I have, and in fact, I think I texted you on our last my family's last little jaunt down to Disney World, where we saw one of the banners posted. So I'm eager to see what they do, and I don't know how they're going to voice Scrooge, since the actor that did the voice, I can't recall his name. He was also Wilbur on Mr. Ed, which I actually just recently learned. Makes sense now that I see the voice. I hear the voice, but I'd like to see how that works out. I want to see if they bring back Launchpad and the whole.
They have released a little, wouldn't call it a trailer, but it's the new cast singing the theme song, and they do show each actor and I believe who they're voicing as they're going through the theme song, and it looks like they're bringing pretty much every character back. And I don't think, from just what I've seen, and I don't know too much about the the history of the show, I don't think they're bringing back any of the original actors, but I could be wrong, to voice the new DuckTales series.
Well, I know it'd be very challenging to do Huey, Dewey, and Louie, but with technology as it is, I'm sure.
Right.
I hate to say it, Doug, but I think you might be out of a job before too long. I know you're retiring, but just hey, Matt Trekker, click, and here's Matt.
Right. Right.
I'm waiting for it. I'm glad that voice actors still have a job. I would hope I could somehow land a voice acting job.
Well, they might need more engineers if they do what you're kind of alluding to.
True. Maybe I'll stay on the tech side.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about this series, although I don't get Disney XD, so I might have to lean on you for your opinion. Maybe put up on Rediscover the 80s, or just give me in general to see what it's like. But what I've read is they're doing 21 half-hour episodes for the first season, and they're also doing 2-hour-long specials. So they've already committed to that, which is, I think, pretty significant.
Yeah.
For a series that, gosh, I guess it's been 30 years since it's
unfortunately, yes. But my son loved the older, the original. We have a DVD 4-disc set. Maybe it's 3 discs, but we do have a set of them. He loved watching them. In fact, he still asks for me to play the theme song in the car periodically. So
Nice.
I know he liked it. So I'm sure that he'll like the new version when it comes out.
I remember liking it as a kid, and of course, I mean, that's a catchy theme song. Disney was pretty good about that. You know, wasn't the Gummy Bears Disney as well? Man, there's some great theme songs. And then I do remember. Do you remember the movie that hit the theaters? The Treasure of the Lost Lamp.
No.
That hit theaters, I think maybe right at the end of the 80s or early 90s. They actually released the movie. And I want to say I might have seen it in the theater because I was a pretty big fan. I remember watching the show, I believe it was in the afternoons.
Yeah.
And it ran for 100 episodes. And then also that movie. So it was very popular. And I don't necessarily think the movie did that well. I didn't make any notes on, how much the box office take was, but anytime you can get an audience, you think about Transformers and G.I. Joe and even Masters of the Universe, they're all releasing theatrical movies based on the property, animated and not animated. Once you get to that level, man, you've really, made your mark on the kids.
And that's it. And I remember enjoying the whole series. I guess I really liked Launchpad and how goofy he was out of all of it. And then they turned him into a superhero later on. In fact, I still remember a small. I don't remember the details. I remember there was a time machine episode, and they say time machine, and it's just not right. Even Bill and Ted, I'm sorry, the phone booth is not a time machine. It's a DeLorean. Leave it alone. I remember quite a bit about it. I loved his Launchpad saying, "If it has wings, I can crush it." So
yeah, he was probably my favorite character as well. So okay, well, stay tuned for that. I'm anxious to again see how that our age, our peers, react to that, and obviously the kids, as Disney brings that back this summer. So I just wish they would bring another one of our favorite shows back in some form or fashion. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
Well, I know you got some news on that. I saw the headline.
Yeah,
I read a little bit of the article earlier today. It looks like we might be getting a toy line.
I don't know. We'll see. Let's first get our mask on. Yes, and as you kind of alluded to, I usually, especially for Toy Fair, Hasbro does a investor presentation online that I'll listen to, and maybe I'm just overconfident or I don't know, maybe naive that they're gonna announce this big huge mask toy line. We still don't have, we have everything and we have nothing at the same time from Hasbro. And
True.
They did this huge presentation at Toy Fair of pretty much every facet of their marketing scheme and all of their big name brands. If you remember last year at this time, they teased us with that weird montage photo that included M.A.S.K of the cinematic universe. And we kind of broke that picture down. We're like, what in the world is this? Because this is like, a mashup of several different images that have already been released.
Right.
So I was anxious going into this presentation that they were going to say a little bit more about the cinematic universe. Well, that wasn't mentioned at all. But as they've done for the past 2 or I think going on 3 years now, they've shown M.A.S.K as one of their new brands, and not only were they in one slide, the M.A.S.K logo, but it was in several slides as I think they call it actually their emerging brands, and then they put M.A.S.K in there with like Micronauts and Stretch Armstrong and that new Hanazuki thing, which they actually had a bigger presentation of that new property in there. But we got to see the M.A.S.K logo, I think, 4 times during this presentation, and then there's also one little snippet of the comics, and it showed the M.A.S.K Revolution #1 comic pretty predominantly. I was like, oh, cool, there's Matt Tracker. That was that one of those awesome Tommy Lee Edwards covers. So, like I said, here we are again. We have everything. We have M.A.S.K appearing in this presentation several times as a new brand, but they gave us nothing as far as any plans for bringing it back, how they're going to bring it back, or any of that. And no mention of the cinematic universe. Nothing really. They kind of touched on comics, but they didn't go into specifics really during the presentation. So, we have the comic, we have the IDW comic that's ongoing, and we're just kind of waiting for word from Hasbro on what they're going to do. And what I kind of alluded to in the article was that, at Toy Fair, it's such a huge, huge event. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, toy show in the country. And there's definitely limitations on how much they can display, how much they want to really go into. You go into those big shows, you're going to try to wow people real quick because there's just so much around them and all their competitors and everything. So what I alluded to in the article was that, well, maybe during their own show at this new HasCon that's coming up in September, they'll go a little bit deeper into each of their properties. They'll have, more space to lay everything out. And I'm crossing my fingers that we'll see something or hear about something at HasCon. And I'm not saying that they'll have like prototypes or even any kind of creative there, but I don't know. Something tells me they're going to go a little bit further into that cinematic universe, at least during that show. So here we sit again.
Right. Unfortunately, we just have to wait and see with them. They're not very, not even hint worthy. They give us that icon, the M.A.S.K logo, but
right.
We have no idea what's going to go on. And we don't know if they're teasing. We don't know. It's going to be
yeah.
Like we said, we saw that one M.A.S.K logo when it first debuted, 2 years ago, and nothing. We didn't see anything. What are you thinking? And then all of a sudden it was comic books. So I would love to be hopeful that this is their key, that there's a movie lined up. But we haven't heard any askings for our script, so I'm just saying that won't happen, or at least not from our end.
Right.
But yeah, we just don't know, and I guess it's a clever thing for them because we are captivated. We just don't know, so we're just going to cling on to whatever is coming at us. But at the same time, it's like, what is it? Are you going to let us down? Are you going to make us wait 2 years before you knock us over with something else that we're not? I mean, the comics are great, but I guess in my assertion, that wasn't what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for the comic book debut. I was looking for the toys and the ever hopeful movie contract, even if it isn't ours, just something. And then we get comic books. I'm like,
well,
it's a start, but really, come on. You got more money than that, Hasbro. Come on.
Right. I've always said Hasbro's a toy company. So they want to get to toys. Well, however they're going to do it, those Transformer movies, yeah, they do a lot worldwide, and those are very profitable, but they are there to produce toys, essentially. And think about this too. G.I. Joe is one of their long-lasting brands
Right.
from the very beginning. And we've gotten a couple movies. We've gotten some 25th anniversary figures and such, and they've released a lot and kind of kept that going. But they've been silent now for I don't know, a couple years at least. I don't know when that second G.I. Joe movie came out. It's been, I think, at least 5 years now.
It's been some time, yeah.
So that's even, G.I. Joe is so many levels above the M.A.S.K, and they're just kind of letting that sit. So it could be that they use G.I. Joe to kind of lead the charge, like they've said, in the cinematic universe. G.I. Joe is the first brand mentioned in all of their press releases and stuff up to this point. And then you get the supporting cast behind G.I. Joe, M.A.S.K, Micronauts, and ROM, and
right.
Visionaries, I think, was the 5. So anyway, it's going to be interesting to see. We'll try to keep an ear to the ground, and when I think about it, I'll zip over to Hasbro's newsroom, and I've got their press release feed that comes to my tablet. So any releases I get, and I'll scan through, and sometimes I'll just go over there and see if they've changed their investor, PowerPoint that they have posted over there. It's still on 2016. So any little change I'm trying to find and dig, and we'll try to keep everybody up to date once we find out anything. But right now, I think people should kind of lean towards September, and we'll cross our fingers that MASKcon will give us a little insight. Let's move on. A couple more things. It's been a while since we podcasted, so I've got several things I wanted to mention in case people haven't been over to the site. Well, one thing I did want to mention, that we had a little giveaway on Facebook. I don't know if you saw that, Wyatt, but I put a little giveaway together, a few comics. I work for a printing company, so I printed out several sheets of those papercraft figures, those templates that you can kind of create your own M.A.S.K figures that kind of look like Minecraft guys. I printed out several of those on cardstock, and then I think I threw in a sticker and maybe a little mini poster I had left over. So I put all that together. Quick shout out to Bill Norris, who won that, and I'm gonna try to do more giveaways, maybe on Facebook or even Twitter, kind of like what I'm doing with Rediscover the 80s. Just trying to beef up our presence there, and of course give our followers a chance to win something cool that they can put in their collection, that kind of a thing. So be on the lookout for that. Did you see this article that our pal Jose from the M.A.S.K P&A group discovered? It was a New York Times article, I think from the 1985 Toy Fair, and from the person writing the article and the people they interviewed at Hasbro, or I guess it was Kenner at the time, they said that the M.A.S.K animated series was initially supposed to be a 5-part miniseries. Thought that was really cool. I had never heard that before. And Jose dug up that article, and I had to kind of dissect it and give my take on it over there on the website. But I thought that was really interesting. We've talked about, and Anna, our friend who is always reviewing along with us during these podcasts, she's always talked about, we wish there was a 2-part episode that they would throw in like they did with several of the other shows. M.A.S.K never did that. And you think about G.I. Joe, several other animated series started out or included some kind of miniseries, during their run. And I just thought that was cool that was initially intended. And I'm wondering if those 5 episodes are locked away in a vault somewhere,
They very well could be, but for some reason, I want to say, don't quote me, but I want to say that in our interview with Doug, he alluded to something along that line, that they were hired for a few episodes. I don't think he said a number. Maybe he did say the number, and I'm forgetful right now. But you mentioning that makes me wonder. I vaguely remember him saying that they were initially hired on for
just a few, and then
and then it kind of, hey, this thing's taking off better than we thought. Let's turn it into an ongoing thing and see how long we can ride this train. That was kind of the again, maybe I'm being wishful now, but I want to I think he said something along those lines.
Well, and now that you say that, I do kind of remember him having some kind of reaction like that. And I'm gonna have to go back to our interview, which is MASKast 38, and listen to what he said, because I think it was like they weren't expecting to do like a 65 episode run right off the bat. So
right.
Maybe that's
why I'm thinking that
some footage somewhere. It would be interesting to know when exactly they contacted him to come into the studio. Was it before or after this date? They were supposed to be, I think is what they said, they were going to release these 5 episodes in June of 85, but we know that the M.A.S.K animated series didn't debut until the end of September. So either that the plan to do the miniseries was scrapped, or they did it. Another theory, which I've somebody commented on Facebook about, which I thought was interesting. Well, like the end credits, of the show has some animation that you just don't see during the show. Some shows at the end credits, you see footage from other episodes and such.
Right.
Maybe they use some of that original animation to do the end credits. And then I kind of had the idea that maybe, we have those mini comics that talk about an origin story, Matt's brother dying and Miles Mayhem betraying him, that sort of thing, in those toy insert comics. And maybe they had the 5, episode miniseries planned around that, and maybe the FCC, or just they thought at the last minute that was too much for kids at the time. Somebody dying, and there was the whole deal with the Transformers movie, and then when the G.I. Joe movie came out, they were going to kill off Duke and decided, oh no, he's just going to be in a coma.
Right.
When that all went down, and that was a decision based on the reaction to killing off Optimus Prime. So I don't know. That was, I think about that. It might have been later. I can't remember when the Transformers movie came out. It might have been like 86 or 87.
It was later, yes.
But I don't know. And maybe there was an ulterior motive for not releasing it based on some story they already had planned out.
Right.
So I don't know. It's interesting to me. I thought any little nugget like this that we get,
yes,
gosh, 32 years later, is just, I don't know. It's just pure energy for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? And then I start digging, and you try to find more stuff, on the internet, and try to maybe seek out some people that might know the details of that. But now, 32 years later, a lot of those people are retired. They're in their 70s or late 60s. And
that's what we need. Honestly, what we need is to find the original writers and producers, and see if we can't get them hooked onto a episode.
Yeah. I've appealed to Mr. Saban several times through his website to released the rights to the soundtrack. So one of these online companies like La La Land Records, they released like the Masters of the Universe soundtrack. I'd love for somebody just to release the Mask soundtrack, even if it's just a digital release and not like on CD or anything like that. I mean, that would just be huge, and a huge,
that'd be a huge
for the community and just getting people back in, because the music of
boost
M.A.S.K
for us.
is awesome. I've been trying to appeal to him for years, to no avail. So anyway, all right. Well, that was a fun little thing that's popped up. A couple other things quickly that I've gone over on the site there to do. Building off our last show, I dove a little bit deeper into the Vortec history, and just basically looking at all the vehicles and how closely they resembled M.A.S.K, and wanted to kind of expand on our previous podcast about that show. I was digging through, I love going to the archive.org and digging through like old magazines and everything that they have over there. And they have just a slew of video game magazines from the 80s. And I found a few reviews of the M.A.S.K video game that was released, I believe, mainly over in Europe. It was for like the Amstrad and the ZX Spectrum consoles, that kind of a thing. And I posted a little snippet of the review. I actually gave it a pretty good review in that magazine, and I thought that was interesting that they were behind the creators on that game. And then I found a couple of fun little things. Found some fan art over on DeviantArt from Shiru Deku. I'm going to butcher that. I don't know if that's just a pen name or whatever, but he did some really cool designs of the characters, more or less in like more real people or real life style, and they added these cool like 80s neon fonts and stuff for their name. That was some really cool art. Go check that out. And then you remember the muscle figures from the 80s?
Yes, I do.
I forgot to mention those on our on our little toy box inventory on our other podcast when we did those. But these things were just really cool. And there's that whole Shapeways website where people design stuff specifically for 3D printers. And we've seen some of our friends from the community put weapons and all kinds of accessories and stuff from the original Kenner toy line, some of which, like that little piece that always gets broke off from Switchblade to keep the wings up, things like that. They've been really creative about putting accessories and such on there. And just got a quick post to our Facebook page, and I mean, these were really cool. I thought they're little miniature figures. They're only about 1.5 inches high. So I kind of likened them to those like muscle size figures from the 80s. And of course, they're not rubber. They're not that rubbery, excuse me, style. They're more like a harder plastic. But the designer, Trent Troop, he posted on our page. I saw the images and I was like, oh man, these are cool, and I got to share them. And I put them over there and got some pretty good reaction from the fans, and some really good traffic came through our site after posting those. And they're interesting. If you got a little bit of extra in your pocket and you want to get one of these figures, they come in different colors, or you can just get like a plain white and custom paint your own more towards the actual figure. Really cool. And he plans to do more. and release more up there. I think he had just 4 of the characters when he initially sent me that message. So really cool. And again, I just love finding new fans out there and interacting with them and seeing their passion for M.A.S.K all these years later to go out and want to design, it's like something like that.
Right.
Really, it's really cool. It's really cool.
It is,
and keeps
like
me
you said,
motivated.
That is it. That, I guess you couldn't say any better. It keeps you motivated because like you and I, we have such a passion for M.A.S.K, and
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes you wonder what's going on. Does anybody else feel the love after a while? But then you get reinvigorated because someone basically finds a niche, whether it's the 3D printer or making the costumes.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much stuff now in the geek world. I'll say, or that everybody's trying to find something new to bring M.A.S.K into, which is really neat.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's awesome.
One more thing, and then let's go ahead and get into the review. There's been a lot since
we've been absent, unfortunately.
Away.
Just life.
Yeah. Well, we've both been busy and had some things going on. Tests we had to study for and pass, and I had to focus in on just our families for a while. So we haven't been on the air. I guess it's been about a month. But anyway, been really kind of frustrated with IDW and the new comic. And this, again, this isn't necessarily a criticism of the artwork or even Brandon Easton. It's just the release date just keeps getting moved around and around and around. And it's really frustrating. We had, the first comic come out in November. We had one in December. And then now number 3 has been pushed back several times. It was originally in January, and then it was moved to mid-February, then the end of February, and now the latest that I have, I'm looking at previewsworld.com, which is pretty reliable. It will be out March 1st. So
Jeez.
For us listening, and while you're listening, it'll probably be the next week. That'll be coming out on March 1st. And then the M.A.S.K Annual, which we've talked about a little bit, which is the larger book and different writers, a couple different stories. They're redoing the Death Stone plot and story in that M.A.S.K Annual. That's going to come out on March 8th. And then right now, Previews World is showing M.A.S.K number 4 and M.A.S.K number 5 for March 29th, which would be awesome if that would happen.
Right.
To get essentially caught up into this monthly release system. So we're getting something at least once a month. So I've heard a couple of things through the grapevine that I won't get into on this show, but it sounds like there was some hold up there, and they're trying to resolve that and get back on track to releasing this each month. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. I've been wanting to get my hands on issue number 3, so that should be coming out March 1st, and then possibly in March we'll get 4 new comic books, 4 new M.A.S.K comic books, which would be great. Number 3, 4, 5, and then that M.A.S.K Annual. So keep your fingers crossed if you're into the series. If you're not into the series, if you've checked out the first maybe couple issues or the Revolution series, look at that M.A.S.K Annual. I'm kind of interested in seeing how that plays out, if they go more classic versus the story that Brandon Easton has been going along with. Just the variety is a good thing.
Yes.
And again, I've somewhat enjoyed the Mask series. There's some things here and there, and maybe we'll get into. I don't think we ever really broke down issue number 2, but when we finally get some more of these books out, we'll do another kind of review podcast, and I'll hash out some of my reservations. But I'm just happy that M.A.S.K is back out there, really, and we've got like an action story. It's not anything that's really, I think, bringing the franchise down. It's but it's just geared towards the modern day. So
right.
Some of us that that I've interacted with that are less than happy with the new book are wanting something more classic. So maybe this annual book will give them something, at least in the meantime, to kind of lean on.
Right. So. And I know you and I have spoke on and off. Maybe we have some creative people out there listening that would like to go in with us, kind of adapting our script into a fan fiction comic. Go ahead and reach us. Reach out to us, either messaging us on Facebook or contacting Jason via the Agents of M.A.S.K's email address, because just really we all have a take or passion for the franchise, and if there's anybody that's creative graphics, that's into doing comics, we're interested, at least talking. We can't pay, but
well, really, we might be able to do a little bit. But yeah, I think it would be fun, and I've for a long time have really wanted to sit down and convert our movie script into something a little more readable.
Right.
Not necessarily a full novel or book, but just something that's like more of a fan fiction, like you say,
right,
that we can release and just let everybody know the story that we've been blabbing about on this show for a long time, just to see what they get their opinions and such. But
right.
Yeah. Anybody wants to reach out to us and do some creative work, even if it's just a few panels or a few scenes, would be really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Jason at agentsofmask.com. You can reach me or just message us on Facebook there. So, well, we've gone on for a long time. It's going to be a long show.
Yes, it is.
Unless we zip through this review. But you ready to go to Ireland, partner?
I am ready to start the MASKast. We come upon a seaside scene, then to a farmer shearing his sheep, with Matt and the duo watching, with Scott complaining that he'd like something else to do. What a surprise. T-Bob replies, scalped is more like it. Scott then says it's an unlucky day for both of them when another farmer named Patty turns and tells him that luck doesn't come from the wishing, but from the doing. Scott then states that he doesn't go for all that luck stuff. However, T-Bob does. Again, the emotional humanity that is T-Bob just radiates from him. Mm-hmm. Then Scott goes over to a sheep to do something while Matt asks Patty to look over factory designs for textiles. He comments on a new strain of sheep that Matt has developed, and now we have Tracker Genetics to add to Tracker whatever for Enterprises.
Right.
That the sheep are now sheared twice as often, adding more jobs. We now turn to Scott saying that this is fun when he falls over the sheep.
Yeah, trying to clip it. Right.
Right. So Matt jokes that he better help Scott before he gets fleeced. And here we go with the puns. T-Bob jokes that he needs a training razor. Then Scott argues that too bad he isn't a sheep or he'd shear T-Bob. And T-Bob replies that he'd only get steel wool.
I actually laughed at that.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. There was a couple chuckle moments. So Scott suggests they check out the other sheep before they get into more trouble. Then Scott replies that that was all a close shave.
Yeah, hardy hard.
So, yeah, so we cut over to a pasture scene where Scott asks Mike if the sheep eat anything other than grass. He'd take a double cheeseburger any day. T-Bob jokes that he'd take one every minute if he could.
Right.
As Mike suggests that they return as it is getting late, T-Bob finds a fork-leaf clover. He looked for luck and found it. Scott corrects him, saying he has to make your own luck, not grow. T-Bob seems to completely ignore it and says that they'll have the luck of the Irish from now on. However, Mike states that he may be right as he points to a rainbow that has now appeared. Perplexed as there is no storm. Scott is intrigued and bets that there is a pot of gold at the end. Of course, T-Bob can't help himself. He feeling lucky all of a sudden. And then Scott remarks that this luck is different when T-Bob interjects that it grows on you. And this takes us to a rocky shoreline.
Right. They're now climbing down the cliffside towards the ocean, and where they viewed this rainbow. Scott yells over to T-Bob to be careful or he'll get his feet wet. Well, T-Bob gets splashed and he kind of shakes it off. And T-Bob says, "You're all wet if you think you're going to find any gold." Well, Mike, who is essentially their babysitter at the moment, he kind of agrees with T-Bob and says they should be getting back. Scott pretty much ignores him and continues to climb down the side of the cliff there, knowing that there's got to be gold nearby. And this is I kind of sat back for a second because Scott is usually defiant with T-Bob. You know, when Scott suggests, "Oh, let's go search over here or something," and T-Bob says, "Well, your dad said," you know, right. He's like, "It'll be okay." But this was really the first time I saw Scott really kind of defiant to somebody else or somebody that was actually supposed to be in charge.
Right.
You know, another adult.
Seems to be his character, you know, to defy what anybody says, really.
Right. And of course, he usually sneaks off anyway after Matt gives him the order to stay put, but he just never tells Matt no's to his face. You know, that's what was kind of brazen with me at this point, where he's just like, screw you, Mike. I'm going to go find this gold.
Pretty much.
Anyway, so they're farther ahead now. They're out on this like outcropping, and Scott tells them to look. And unbelievably, he does see a pot of gold, and Mike can't believe it either. T-Bob thanks his four-leaf clover for giving them the luck. Well, Scott corrects him. It was their Scott corrects him that it's their four-leaf clover, and he wants to go tell his dad as they walk away. And at this point, I was like, "What? Why don't you keep going? You went down that far. Why are you walking away?" Well,
exactly.
We learned later in the episode, obviously, that they couldn't reach it. There was some water in between, or there was another little island where the gold was, so they couldn't get to it. But they didn't really explain it here, and I was like, why just go now?
That's it.
So anyway, so we get back to the farmhouse. Scott tells him the whole story of seeing the gold. Even though Mike saw it too, he changes his story, thinking that he didn't see it and that Scott and T-Bob may have been kissed with fairy dust or something. I can't remember what he says there.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Scott kind of scowls at him, and Mike is now, reiterating to Matt that Scott scowls at Mike, and then he now reiterates to Matt that they did see it. And then he isn't kissing anyone. And he gives a big, like, yuck.
Right.
Which I kind of actually laughed at. Uh, Matt, Matt asks Matt asks him if he's sure it wasn't just the sun. Mike agrees that the sun can play tricks on the hillside, and they'd say anything just after finding T-Bob's shamrock. Well, Scott scowls at him again. I'm thinking now that Mike just wants to go back and kind of claim it for his own, you know.
Right.
Well, Scott says under his breath that this is a sham, as Mike tells Matt he's going to head back to tend his sheep now. Scott asks why would he lie if they did see the gold? And T-Bob says he's referring to Mike. He's full of baloney, like the castle Patty told him about. Well, Matt corrects him. It's Blarney. And suggests they go take a ride there. So he pulls out this like picture from his briefcase, and he's I think it was Scott that still thinks it, or maybe it was T-Bob, looks like a roll of bologna or something. Anyway, there was some bologna joke there. But Matt kind of shrugs them off at this point and decide to go sightseeing. So now we get to the castle.
And this is where Scott asks why kissing a Blarney stone was fun. Matt says that it's supposed to make you more eloquent as he holds Scott's legs. Fancy words that no one understands but pretends to. So now T-Bob wants to try so he can talk good, as he puts it. Scott jokes that he needs it. So T-Bob is lowered, kisses the rock, is raised, and then dusts himself off, all prim and proper. And that's when we hear our T-Bob basically change his vocabulary and states that their valuable assistance endears you to be my indebtment. Now that he's a gentleman, the letters then is interrupted. Now that he's a gentleman, the letters then is interrupted by Scott saying that he's a man of letters, D-U-M-B. I thought that was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I laughed at that.
Couldn't help but think of Stooges moment, B-O-N-E, head. But anyway, so Matt asks them to stop and see the rest of the castle. T-Bob starts saying the elements of history, then Scott races back and says that he's going to be history before too long. Overlooking from the castle, Scott comments on the multitude of daffodils when Scott turns and then says that there are few weeds in the garden. Matt says that he's starting to make sense as we see Switchblade, Manta, Piranha, and Jackhammer arrive on the horizon. Scott asks what they are doing there. Seems to be a common question all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When Matt replies that they aren't picking four-leaf clovers, they run off and into a rental sedan, which seems to be kind of a long scene for me.
Yeah, I did. I was kind of.
This seemed a little bit timely, for what it was. It just seemed to go on.
They did get it right though, because he jumped in the left side or the right side of the car
to drive. Yes.
Yeah.
And Scott comments that he wishes they had the Thunderhawk instead of the rental car, which that perplexed me. He goes everywhere with Thunderhawk. He goes on a cruise. Right. He goes on a vacation. And today he chooses not to take Thunderhawk.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's when Matt leans over and opens the laptop and makes that good call. Level 1 emergency. Select the best agents for mission in Ireland. And we get, I call it a quirky alarm. It wasn't the normal alarm that we typically hear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we get Julio Lopez with Firefly and his skills as international missions. And their little scene is that he's playing chess and basically rapidly does a checkmate and just walks out.
Mm-hmm.
The next agent we get is Calhoun Burns, and he gets our new vehicle, Raven. And we get his job or his skills are architect and amphibious vehicle. And his little scene is he's taking water to a horse, drops the bucket as his Agents of M.A.S.K watch goes off before it reaches the horse, and then he jogs off. Then he comes back to basically push it closer to the horse so it can actually drink it. Then the selection is approved with Matt signing off as assemble Mobile Armor Strike Command. Advised that they need the Thunderhawk.
And that was good. That he requested his baby to come along for the ride.
It still perplexes me. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of drama to this, but why did you not take Thunderhawk? Holy cow, that's your baby. You take it everywhere.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, if you think about some of the episodes that we've rated a little more highly, it's where he's kind of caught in the jungle or he's out somewhere, doesn't have his mask, doesn't have Thunderhawk or anything to help him, and he gets cornered. It's I guess the dramatic effect for it, but they didn't really incorporate that into the episode.
No, that's why it disconnects me. You know, they jump in the rental car and go. Mm-hmm. That wasn't like a crazy scene where you have Switchblade overhead shooting at you. Now you wish you had Thunderhawk. It's more of we see them coming over the horizon. Yeah, we better 180 it and at least get a running chance and call in the troops. That's not. I mean, the danger is impending, but not like I said, not like Switchblade.
Right
there, you are, trucker. I'm gonna get you, and bombs them.
You're right. Yeah, I agree. Well, after Matt alludes to dropping Scott and T-Bob and the fighting O'Trackers back at the farm there, we get to another farmhouse with all the Venom vehicles parked outside, and we see our pal Mike there that was watching Scott and T-Bob tell Mayhem that he saw the treasure of Brian Baru. And Rax wonders who this guy is. Sounds like a 2-bit thief. Vanessa suggests it's probably one of his relatives. Mayhem tells him to shut up as he wants to hear more about the treasure. And Mike goes on that it's a legend that the king and his treasure, and he thinks he might have found it down by these rocks. Well, Mayhem says he has heard enough and tells him to get lost. And then he tells Rax and Dagger to prepare the vehicles and Vanessa to check the supplies, that they're leaving immediately. Well, Mike asks about his share of the treasure for essentially telling them, and Mayhem tells him that his share is his life. I thought that was a good line.
Right.
Mike then tells Mayhem that the treasure is probably cursed by leprechauns, and he hopes fairy darts pierce his black heart. And he kind of walks out. Dagger says he doesn't want to get hit by any fairy darts, as Mayhem kind of grabs him by the collar and escorts him out, saying that he has had enough foolishness and he wants the treasure.
Right.
And Venom rolls out from there. And then we head back to the farm. Matt is telling Scott and T-Bob he's got some important work to do and tells them to stay there and, of course, to stay out of trouble. Well, T-Bob, who is still holding his shamrock, says they'll be as good as gold. Right. And, they're going to be, I kind of said to myself, they're going to be going looking for the gold.
Right. Well, to me, I don't know if you saw it, but when he's holding his shamrock, to me, he looked like he was doing the He-Man pose. I can't remember the line. It's been so long.
I have the power.
Yeah, I have the power. That's what it looked like to me. It was like he was doing the He-Man stance.
I didn't catch that. Anyway, so Matt, he rolls out in his rental car, and I was kind of wondering where they were going to rendezvous with the agents. They didn't really. I would have thought maybe they would do it, back at the farm or somewhere. But anyway, they didn't really go into that.
No.
Scott tells T-Bob that it's a good idea that they'll find the gold and prove they weren't lying. I was like, I knew it. I knew they were going to go after it. T-Bob says, what does he have to fear with his lucky 4-leaf clover and a sinking feeling in his stomach And I was like, well, he has a stomach.
Scott
says they'll go get the gold in his raft and that they won't sink. T-Bob reminds them that that's what they said about the Titanic, though.
Wow.
And we are then headed out to sea now with Scott and T-Bob.
As they are rowing, with T-Bob worrying that he expects to see icebergs any minute now. Scott explains that this is the only way to get to the gold. So they were, to me, it was like, so they were like, back at the scene, originally, they were like a hop away to getting on to the little tiny remote, not so remote island. And we take a little paddle boat ride. It just, that to me, that was a big disconnect. Probably for the dramatic effect, but still, it was. I guess I wanted this episode to speed up. So anyway, T-Bob's only worry about getting out. It now dawns on Scott where's all this fancy talk. And as T-Bob replies, they hit a boulder, and a wave. As T-Bob replies to that comment, the duo hits a boulder, then a wave grabs them and throws them out of the raft, with Scott yelling, asking T-Bob, "Where are you?" He bobs up to say he's drowning. Then then Scott tells him to use his telescope legs, just like Go-Go Gadget legs.
Right.
And T-Bob replies that he already is. It's too deep. Then a huge wave approaches as the duo scream for help, and T-Bob's four-leaf clover is left floating as we cut to our dramatic commercial break.
Mm-hmm.
So where does this leave you? I'm almost hesitant to ask.
Actually, I didn't find too much going on with this that would knock me down a lot. I mean, for being mainly a Scott and T-Bob story, I actually enjoyed the first half. Really like how they did the break, leaving it to kind of the imagination more of the viewer, showing that Clover just floating around, on the surface and wondering where they are or what happened. Get sucked under the water, those waves and stuff. And it's dangerous out there in those cliffs and all that. If you think about it, and the history of, pirates using fake lights and stuff to crash ships and all that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of like the drama at the halfway point. The story was somewhat predictable, I guess, and it's kind of silly to think that Venom would be interested in just one pot of gold. I was hoping Mike's kind of ties to Venom would be somewhat explained further and give more of a reason of how he was, connected with them to begin with. How he thought I found gold, I'm going to call Mayhem. Was he a trainee or, that kind of stuff interests me, I guess.
Right.
Trying to think what his ties were. There was a few roll my eyes moments early, but I actually thought the duo's interaction was more natural and funnier than most episodes. They were really harping on each other's quirks, which is, I think, a lot better than just using puns. Scott was talking to, T-Bob about all of his proper language he was using and getting on him for that, and his Clover, and then T-Bob was harping on him for not believing in luck, and then all of a sudden he now believes in luck. That kind of a thing. They're playing off each other more than just, I'm just going to insert this pun right here, So I kind of thought the humor was a little bit better. And we got a good bit of details right in the episode with Matt, driving on the left-hand side, and he's requesting the computer to send Thunderhawk, and they're also explaining why they could get to the gold first. With the getting there with the raft, and they kind of, when I was wondering why they couldn't get to it at first, and realizing, there was some separation between them that couldn't get to the gold. So, and I thought the animation was good, and there's some nice painting shots of that castle, and some of the other setup scenes I thought were really good. So I only dropped it a half point. I'm down at 4.5. What say you?
Well, maybe it was a wrong day for me to watch this. Because yeah, the good for me, aside from the panic shots, the back and forth was okay, but to me, I guess I thought it was a little too much. Um, uh, like you said, it's more of a
Scott and T-Bob?
Yeah, it was more of a Scott and T-Bob episode, like you said, and I know they add to it. Some episodes they really added to it, but it was just, I guess it was too much back and forth for me. But the call up was good. We get Julio and now Calhoun and Raven. I like you. I kind of saw the plot already. Once they said the pot of gold, I'm like, well, there's the plot. Venom's after it. You know, it was kind of very predictable. The genetically modified sheep was a little of a reach, but I left it be because it is M.A.S.K, and they came up with other quirks that were crazier. But as a whole, I'm not interested in this episode. It just didn't draw me in. I guess I wasn't captivated yet. Even with the dramatic commercial, I guess maybe I kind of saw that they were going to be rescued, or they were. It wasn't as to me. It wasn't as traumatic as it probably could be. Like I don't know,
falling off a cliff, or
I guess I was anticipating that. Maybe that's a falsity of mine, but nonetheless, I was not blown away.
Hold up, man. Your mic went out or something.
That's what I kicked.
Okay. Yeah.
I know I kicked something when I was trying to stretch out.
All right. It was just a little short. What your last sentence there?
So anyway, so it just didn't captivate me. I was not drawn in on this, and I guess what tweaked my tailpipe, if you want to call it that, for automotive talk, was Matt leaves freaking Thunderhawk behind. Where was the drama? What was the drama of that, except that they sped away in the rental car? There was no, like I said earlier, it was not impending doom. It wasn't Matt falling out of the freaking spinning restaurant without Spectrum.
Right.
That I get. I don't get you take the baby everywhere else. What gives?
Well, and here's where I liked them having the rental cars, because he got to use the laptop. We got to see that again, which we know.
But he's used the laptop sitting in the hotel room.
Well, he has. Yes, it's true. But just carrying along with him, he's at least prepared enough to call the team if necessary.
Right. I guess I see that, but
totally out of the country, so to speak.
So anyway, boiling it down, I had to give it an 80s rating because I wasn't about ready to completely fail this. So I gave it a 1.21 rating.
Wow.
I just
holy cow, you dropped it all the way down to 1.
I just cannot. I can't quite. Okay. I'm like you. I can't quite kill it, but you got to impress me.
This could be interesting then. We're going to see what they can give you back in part 2. All right. Well, let's get back into it after the break. Scott services briefly and then dives down to pull T-Bob to the surface again. Scott tells him it's no time for blowing bubbles as another wave pushes them towards like this pole, and they latch onto it. And T-Bob says he's standing on something. They look below and see they are standing on the mast of a sunken ship. So Scott says they're going to be a wreck unless they get out of there. Well, T-Bob gets the idea to walk along the mast to a large rock nearby. And Scott is now hanging on to T-Bob. And they make it to the rock with T-Bob then shaking water out of his ear holes. calling it, I think, the Great Flood or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was rolling my eyes at that one. So with them safe, we're back with Matt, and he gets out of his car seeing tire tracks, and he quickly identifies them as venom treads and also finds some wool fibers. He says they'll run them through the Thunderhawk computer when it arrives, and that Venom isn't pulling any wool over his eyes. Well, other than that bad pun, I wasn't sure where Matt was at this point. It looked like the house where I guess Venom and Mike were, but I don't know how he would know to go there.
Right.
I just didn't know, where he took off to and where he was at this point.
That was what I was.
Really explained.
That was like me. To me, a similar farmhouse, but I didn't think it was the same one, so I didn't know where.
Yeah.
Along the route.
Been right. He could have went back to the castle or something. Oh, that's where I saw Venom, and let me try to trail him. But they just didn't make that really obvious. So then we get cut back to this nice panning shot of Scott and T-Bob on this rock with the rainbow overhead, and Scott ponders now if only their raft hadn't ripped. Well, T-Bob gets an idea and tells Scott to climb aboard, and he begins to transform to scooter mode, but he hops towards the water and then engages, I guess, his surfboard mode, which I didn't know he had.
That was actually pretty cool. I like.
It was a cool.
It was ski mode, is what I called it.
Well, it was a cool feature, but I'm like, why in the world didn't you use that to begin with? Okay, why did you have to bring out the raft?
That's it. Why didn't you think about it way back in 20 minutes ago or whatever? Yeah.
Well, anyway,
now you know why my rating wasn't so great.
Right. Well, there were some moments like that where I was like, come on. But anyway, he asks Scott what he thinks, and he can only complain that why he didn't think of this sooner. Well, you're the one that built them, you big dummy.
That's it.
T-Bob says he always criticizes him as a large wave causes them now to capsize in this ski mode. And T-Bob latches onto another rock with Scott kind of hanging on to T-Bob, and then T-Bob uses his telescoping arms to latch on another rock, and then he drags himself over in another rock, and they do this more until they reach the shore. And Scott says he should have called him T-Crab after that trick. Yeah. So then he looks over, and now he sees the pot of gold again.
Right. And this is where Scott is actually disappointed, seeing that it's merely an illusion. T-Bob jokes, easy come, easy glow. And that's the clue for Scott that I guess that's what triggered him to think more about it. So they run into a cliff where they see a mirror. Scott ascertains that it's a prism reflecting the gold. The duo go back and forth, and then Scott looks into this, basically a little crevice or a crack in the rocks, and says, "We didn't see this." T-Bob looks in and exclaims, "Wow, and here's a pot of gold." And as he says that he doesn't intend to close his eyes for a second, Scott wonders how they could get a sample so that they can give it back to Matt, to believe their story.
Right.
Next, we hear a helicopter sound with T-Bob stating, "It sounds like we have company. It's trouble with a capital V." We see Switchblade carrying Piranha and Jackhammer with Manta flying along. Switchblade lowers Piranha and Jackhammer from this.
It was a cool feature. I thought it was cool. I did a quick snapshot of it and shared it on Facebook and on Twitter.
Yeah.
It was like this claw, but it still had some kind of actuator to pick up and drop the vehicles. So, and keeping with the story that this is kind of like a secluded island, I thought it was good. You're bringing the land vehicles along with this like claw feature.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
It was. So anyway, they lower the vehicles with T-Bob saying it's getting crowded, with Scott also saying that they need to hide. Venom lands and comes up to the projected image of the pot of gold. Rex claims, "Look at all that gold." The shepherd was right. Vanessa counters with, "Shut your mouth," before a bat mistakes it for a cave. And that's actually pretty good.
She was on him this episode. Every time he spoke.
It gets worse and worse as they go. You notice?
Right.
So Dagger is elated as well, with Miles shouting, "Shut up." I swear that's all Miles knows how to say anymore.
At least the Dagger.
Yeah. After a lot of name calling, he instructs him to get him the gold. Dagger runs up to it and then basically walks right through the image, falling on the other side. Now Miles walks up and investigates and sees the prism. He shouts, "You idiots! The gold is in there!" And they peek through the crevice where he instructs them to blast the gold out of there. And that's when we cut to our transport plane, which is flying in and landing.
Finally.
Yeah, really.
Now, I did put that in there because I thought, finally we get to this point where it arrives and it lands in a field with Matt looking on. As it comes to stop, it opens its big, huge, I call them the mouth doors of the plane. And Matt jogs up the ramp and drives out Thunderhawk with Firefly and Raven following behind. And the transport plane then flies off, and the agents kind of huddle around Thunderhawk's computer for analysis of the fibers. And the computer identifies a certain type of sheep that Matt believes to be only handled by Patty and Mike. So Julio suggests going to question them, and the vehicles roll out. And I was trying to put the story together here. Okay, well, maybe Matt was back at that farmhouse where Venom was, and he found the fibers from Mike being there, and now they're going back to ask Mike. Well, I don't know why they just didn't talk to him in the first place about what was going on. Anyway, we get back to Patty's farm, and the masked agents confront Mike, and he admits to wanting a share of the gold. He says work as a farmhand leaves him with his hands being the only thing that lines his pockets. Right. Julio kind of confronts him here, saying that he didn't care how he did it, how he was going to line his pockets. And Mike goes on that it would have been his until his cohorts threw him out and told after telling them the location. Calhoun asks what gold he was talking about, and Mike tells him about the legend of Brian Baru and about how the gold was used to capture ships crashing into the island, and when they spotted the gold. And Matt now thinks that Scott and T-Bob were telling the truth, and they run off to their vehicles again. And Mike warns them, like he did to Venom, that they're doomed by 1,000 fairy darts, just like Mayhem and his friends. And Julio asks Matt where to, and Matt says to follow the rainbow. So we get back to the cave where we've got Jackhammer and Piranha converting and beginning to laser blast a hole in the wall to reach the gold. Still hiding around the corner, which I did a panorama of this shot here. This was pretty cool, where Scott and T-Bob are kind of hiding and the vehicles are in the horizon there up on this hill. Scott tells T-Bob to rock away, and T-Bob throws this rock and lands on Jackhammer's windshield guard. And Dagger jumps out and he's like, "Who threw that?" Mayhem comes over and yelled at him, but Dagger thinks it's a leprechaun that's throwing rocks back at him for going after the gold, I guess. Mayhem says he won't accept any lame brain excuses from a lame brain and to get back to work. So Dagger reminds him what the shepherd said about the leprechauns getting them with fairy darts, blah, blah, blah. Mayhem calls him a moronic jerk and tells him he'll give him something to worry about if he doesn't get back to work. So Mayhem kind of kicks a rock in frustration, which lands next to T-Bob, and T-Bob hurls it back at Dagger, which causes him to jump, which is kind of a fun scene there.
Yeah.
And then we finally get M.A.S.K now approaching with an awesome, maybe the best part of the whole, or our best highlight of the whole episode with this transformation sequence.
It was. We see M.A.S.K entering the scene, as you said, all jumping off the cliff and transforming, that was probably, like you said, the best. To me, this is probably the best of the whole freaking episode.
Well, it's cool. They just kind of drive off a cliff and expect their cars to convert. What would happen if they didn't at that time?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It was really cool.
It was. But me and noticing things, there was no M.A.S.K commands when the masks come on. Matt says that there's the rainbow and Venom is properly at the end. A surprised Mayhem yells, "Mask!" I like they caught the detail of Miles's eyes, like they were very surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Get to your vehicles, and he instructs Dagger to continue blasting. Venom jumps in their vehicles with their masks coming down, and we see a quick shot of the masked vehicles. Then the duo comment, "It's Matt and the team." T-Bob also adding, "just in time." Matt starts blasting at Manta and Piranha, shattering Manta's windshield, which was good to see.
Mm-hmm.
Raven takes aim at Switchblade, with Miles saying, "Time for a swim." And we're taken back to Calhoun, where he's using the discs to knock down Switchblade, who crashes into the hillside and screams to the ground.
That was really nice. I mean, again, we have made it no secret that we love the mortality of the vehicles and showing damage and all that. But man, that was a heck of a crash.
It was. That was actually good. I liked it. Miles jumps into Jackhammer and the two drive off as Firefly blasts away at them. The blast shows Miles at an underground entrance, and he instructs Dagger to follow it. Julio comments, "What do you know? A hole in one." We're in the cave now, with Jackhammer approaching the pot of gold, with Dagger commenting that there isn't a leprechaun in sight. Miles replies, "Shut up, you brainless cretin. We'll load up what we can and come back for the rest." On the surface,
I thought that at that point, it's one little pot of gold. Shouldn't they be able to fit it all in Jackhammer in one load?
You would think. And what gets me is he says we'll fit it all and come back for the rest.
Well,
they didn't even do that for that load, the last gold load. They balled it up in Santa's sack.
Right.
It looked like there was 2 tons there before. So.
Right.
Yeah. So we're back on the surface with Matt chasing Rax and Vanessa.
Give me a second while the dog gets a drink.
You want me to continue then?
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. So on the surface, Matt is chasing Rax and Vanessa. Rax asks, "Doesn't that tin can pilot ever give up?" as he comically falls into the hole and coincidentally falls off his bike. Well, we haven't seen that for a while, so that was actually pretty good.
Right. Yeah. We were due for a Rax crash.
Yeah. Vanessa pulls up and says, "Get in, Rax, before I change my mind." And to me, I noticed that there was no mask, the reverb sound effect that they usually do when they're wearing their masks.
Mm-hmm.
She transforms Manta into jet mode, and Matt notices the duo. "Not again," he comments. Next, we see Scott briefing the team on what happened. T-Bob comments that he wishes there were real leprechauns, when Matt says maybe there are, but you two stay in here. Of course, that probably broke. I know it wasn't part of the scene, but I could already hear Scott going, "Oh, Dad."
I liked how he kind of snapped his fingers,
Yeah.
You wait here.
So anyways, we're inside the cave where we hear Julio's voice, kind of a reverb voice rather. I wouldn't be doing that if I were you. Dagger turns and drops the gold bars on Miles' foot, sending him hopping in pain. Next, we see a very small pink silhouette as it warns them of a wrath if they don't return the gold. As Mayhem tells him to get going, the pink image shoots a laser at Dagger's feet, making him jump in the air in panic, screaming, "Fairy darts!" as he bulldozes Miles over. Suddenly, Miles is now scared and says, "Wait, I'm getting out of here." And that was probably the best comedy of the whole scene, was that little bit right there.
Yeah, it was kind of comical. But like right after this, where Dagger kind of emerges from the tunnel and telling them not to follow him, and he drives off the cliff. I'm like, where is Mayhem? Because we didn't see him jump in the sub. And he was just kind of running after Piranha at this point.
Right.
So I was like, what happened to Mayhem? But apparently he was in the sub because, they hit the water and Dagger holds onto the back of the sub as it takes off. It was just, I don't know. That was just weird.
Right.
You get blasted in the face with the sub engines hanging on the back like that. But anyway, we get back to the cave now, and Calhoun comes around the corner, and he uses Gulliver full power to enlarge the leprechaun, which was Matt all along. And Matt says, with the Gulliver mask and his spectrum laser bolts, they sure leprechaunned Venom. And they have a little chuckle there. We get back to the farm, and Matt says, since the gold was found on Patty's property, it will fund the new wool and textile plant. Matt says when Mike found out, he was so ashamed and he essentially left the country. So they didn't put him in jail or bring any charges on him. Right. Patty says he's sorry about Mike, but with his new breed of sheep and the plant, the town will now prosper again. And in the meantime, of course, Scott and T-Bob are bouncing around in the wool, with Scott calling it fun. T-Bob calls it sheer ecstasy, as they all, of course, chuckle, and we pan out from the barn and fade to black to the end of the episode. And we fade right up into, of course, our PSA,
where they are having a family barbecue with Scott saying, "What a slow burn, T-Bob. The burgers aren't cooking." T-Bob replies that they are in the pink. Scott says that he knows how to hurry them up and grabs the lighter fluid. Matt shouts at Scott, "Don't ever add lighter fluid to a fire. It could explode." "Yeah, you're right, Dad," he replies. T-Bob gives him a burger and asks, "Try it now." Scott replies, "It's good. Well done, T-Bob." And they all have a laugh.
I was like, he just kind of grabs the burger right off the grill. I was like, that's not hot.
Exactly.
Takes a big bite. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a cartoon.
Right. Well, I guess getting into where I landed on the final rating. Just in the second half, I did like the drama at the halftime. I like that they somewhat worked together to get to safety, although Scott, he pulled T-Bob up, and but it was essentially T-Bob that kind of saved the day, moving them back to the shore. I liked Switchblade's extension, the car carrier there. I thought that was a fun new feature.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that Switchblades, being destroyed in that battle, I thought it was going to be over kind of at that point. They were going to bail, because usually once a vehicle or something gets destroyed, and even with racks toppling and going in Manta and Manta flying off, I thought it was going to be over at that point, but it lasts a little bit longer than I expected after that, and doing that whole little trick with Gulliver. So we got, these episodes where we get the new agents. There was kind of a standard or precedence that's been set of there's usually some pretty good sequence or transformation sequence, and usually we'll get to use their mask at least once so we can see what it does, and we can kind of get introduced to the characters. So we had a good one pretty much for Raven. We got the Gulliver use. We got Raven shooting those discs like the toy. We got to see Firefly transform, in that sequence that we talked about that we thought was probably the best part of the episode. Didn't get Julio's mask, which I think is Steamer. Didn't get that at all. So I don't know. I guess it was okay. We got introduced to them somewhat. I could tell Julio, and obviously with his name, that he's Hispanic. Didn't know exactly what accent or where Calhoun was coming from. I don't know if you kind of.
I heard it, but I couldn't place where they were trying to.
I don't know if it was like supposed to be Australian or I don't know. I couldn't.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just American. Who knows? But I couldn't really dip into that. And then of course although the disc didn't do anything other than just smack the side of the switchblade, I thought the whole destruction sequence was pretty cool. Some of the bad things I put down, I'll just run through quick. I wasn't high on the sound effects on this episode for mainly the vehicles, but you mentioned a couple little things with the reverb effect that they were or weren't using with the masks.
Right.
Some were good, like the transport plane was really good, and I liked that scene and kind of how they watched it fly off. Always wondering who is flying that thing, if it's on autopilot or if it's Bruce up there. I'm just flying y'all over this time. But anyway, some of the vehicle sounds, the car sounds that are usually good, I for some reason didn't think they were that great this episode. As far as the story, I wish they had filled in a little bit more of the gaps and how they were connected. Like Mike and how he contacted Mayhem. For me, Matt believing Scott and T-Bob about the gold after Mike was told Matt about the myth was, I don't know. I guess it was a little bit of a stretch. Of course, by now Matt has seen a bunch of these legends and long lost treasures come to life and turn out to be true across the globe in other episodes. So maybe Mike's witness would have been enough for him to believe that this gold existed, but I don't know. The other disconnect with the story was that Mike issued all of these warnings and curses on the gold. So if he was that worried about, then why did he even want it in the first place?
Exactly.
That was just something that pulled me out. And the puns finally worn on me by the time the episode was over. There was a lot more in the second half there was in the first, and a lot of that I thought, which was good humor in the first episode, didn't really carry over in the second. And why didn't Mayhem just hop in Jackhammer and take what gold he could have to when he fled?
That would make too much sense.
Yeah. But then again, I guess putting it in Jackhammer would be a bad plan anyway, because they would have had to fly Jackhammer out of there. So
right.
Maybe the whole plan was just, why didn't you get a tarp or something for some kind of cargo net on Switchblade to carry it out of there? Anyway, one tick that I'll mention. When they first encounter the gold, they're looking through this crack and they can see it. It's right there. But then they had this long underground entrance to get down to the gold, which really didn't match up with the angle that they were looking. And
no,
this was like hundreds of feet down in the ground where they went down there with the vehicles. They weren't looking hundreds of feet in the ground when they're looking through that crack to see the gold.
No.
So that was just a little tick that kind of bothered me. I did mention maybe Calhoun's accent is it's kind of sounded like the Fonz from Happy Days. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're going for. I can't remember who does his voice. If it's Mark, who was the the impressionist. But anyway, I ended up pulling it down another point. I went down to 3.5, but I still rounded up to 4. I thought it was better than the last episode, which I think I gave it a 3. So I'm a little scared. I don't know if this is going to be your lowest yet, or if you had any reason to bring it back up from that 1.21. But what was your final verdict?
Well, the jumping scene was actually pretty cool. I like seeing them all jump off the cliff. That was a pretty good effect where they're all transforming. Got to see Raven and see what it does. I was a little disappointed. I thought this should do more than just basically lob a frisbee at someone, but it is what it is. But we still got to see the Gulliver mask and what it does. It's actually pretty impressive.
It's a pretty cool feature, I thought.
Yeah, I guess there's more comedy to me with all the bickering and yelling back and forth from Miles with the other Venom troops, yelling at Dagger and Vanessa and Rax bickering back and forth. That was actually fun for me. That helped push the ratings up a little bit. But to me, it was still a weak episode. It just did not grab me. The disconnects, like you said, to you it was a tick. To me, it was just, what are you thinking? It's literally right on the other side of this rock wall, and yet now you open this alternate route that shows it, a quarter mile, a couple hundred yards, whatever distance down below. So that's all way off. The sound effects were not right. I should mark them up as ticks rather than down like I usually do, but the whole you can't even say mask on, only on occasion to get the mask to come down. There's so much that bugged me, and then I don't really count it, but the whole PSA didn't jive with anything.
Right. Well, now that I think about it too, that might have been the only mask use we had this whole episode was him shrinking. Right?
Yeah, that's it. We didn't. Well, no, we had Spectrum because Spectrum shut the laser. But we still didn't hear him shout.
It was still kind of tied around that scene, though. The battle between the vehicles and when M.A.S.K first came on the scene, I thought was good. But yeah, that they didn't really do any M.A.S.K battling.
That's it.
So what did you finally land on?
Well, I moved it up just a small tick. I moved it up to like a 1.5, and I rounded up to 2. Okay. Just to me, this was like the writers' hearts were not in this episode. It's like they were just scrounging for material for this episode. To me, I just didn't feel right.
Well,
to me,
and again, I probably went a little bit easier on it than you, but it did not make sense that somebody was going to call Venom in for just one little pot of gold unless it was some big, huge treasure.
Right.
That kind of thing, like we talked about, was it the last episode where Dagger's hauling this sack of gold bars is what they came for in the for the Jesse James treasure. I'm like, come on, this is kids play for Venom. They should be going after Fort Knox and these long lost artifacts that have some miraculous power. That kind of a thing, right. More than just a couple bars of gold here and there. I mean, that whatever treasure they would have gotten away with out of this pot of gold would probably covered to build another switchblade.
That's it.
But not much else. So Maybe I should have been a little more critical of it, but I don't know. For some reason, maybe it was because we got some new agents involved too that helped weight a little bit higher than an episode where it was just the same old guys and stuff. But we were a little bit off with the rating. But I guess before going to the poll, anything noted from our script that you saw in there?
This one, no. I was really digging, but I couldn't.
I didn't see anything either. I haven't probably in a few episodes, but then again, like we said before, we had about the first 30 or 35 episodes that we were reviewing, kind of looking for ideas and stuff when we wrote the script. So some of this is the second half of the series we really didn't go over and haven't gone over until now.
Right.
So the poll, we didn't get that many votes this time. The overwhelming majority went to 4, which was 57% of the vote, and we just had one vote for 5, 3, and 2 at 14%. So it was a little top heavy as far as the voting goes, and we've got some comments here to pass along, our listener reviews as we finish up our own reviews. Our first comment is John Trigonis.
Right, and he went really in depth. I'm gonna just for the sake of time, we've been going on for quite a while. I'm going to kind of highlight it if you don't mind, John. I enjoyed this episode. I watched it twice, actually mainly because the transformations of Thunderhawk, Raven, Firefly, and even Manta were some of the best I've ever watched in M.A.S.K. Overall, I didn't really catch too many flaws in this episode, except maybe some of the ones we've seen before. Matt assuming the treads could only belong to V.E.N.O.M, calling in a level 1 emergency for very little to go on. Fast forwarding, he kind of comments, he finishes up that all in all, I thought this was a very fun episode with lots of stellar animation, particularly in the transformations, but also in some of the wise shots of Ireland, the ocean, and the rocks.
I think he meant to say wide shots there. But yeah, there were some great panning and pretty cool setup shots throughout. Next comment goes over to Decker. And this person says, pretty much like the episode for Calhoun Burns and Raven, which is my favorite toy as a kid. I've always wondered, because of this episode, where exactly they intended Agent Burns to be from. Plus, the way he says Gulliver always makes me smile. Keep up the great job reviewing episodes. It allows us fans to relive talking to our friends about the episodes like we were kids. So thank you, Decker, for that compliment. And we've got another one here from Anna, of course.
Right. This is a nice episode. It highlights were when the M.A.S.K vehicles transformed in the beginning of the battle, towards the end in the split screens when the M.A.S.K and V.E.N.O.M masks come on. I also noticed that we see Manta transform back from its airplane mode. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's very often that we see this, which is true.
Going from airplane to car?
Car, yeah. It's usually the other way around.
True.
In addition, I thought it was cool when Scott and T-Bob realized they were standing on a shipwreck, and how it's explained later how ships that came looking for the treasure were smashed against the rocks. Finally, I like how V.E.N.O.M treated Mike when he thought he would receive a share of the treasure. Once again, they revealed themselves as true villains. However, like the Quest of the Canyon, I don't think this episode contained enough interesting or unusual to make it stand out from the rest of the treasure hunting stories. And also, like the Lost Fleet, it contains some stereotypes. They are incorrect, but who knows? Maybe portraying Ireland like this will attract more tourists.
Well, and that's what they normally do with these when they go to different countries. They play off their resources, essentially what they're known for. And yeah, it is kind of profiling, if you want to call it that. But I don't know. This episode didn't bother me too much. I'm not too familiar with Ireland. Anyway, but they go kiss the Blarney Stone, that kind of a thing. You knew that was coming, and they do hit some of the famous sites usually when they're at every location. But yeah, good point about the plane mode. I was thinking, I think it's the episode where they're in Rome and they get the sword of Caesar. Can't remember the name of that one, where I remember Manta transforming back into car mode and like hiding amongst some trees. For some reason that sticks to mind. What was that? The ghost sword? No, it might have been Caesar's sword or something like that.
Caesar's sword, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's a good call on that, Anna. And then we've got another lengthy kind of comment from Jade, who left it on Facebook. I'm going to try to zip through this like you kind of did, Wyatt. Highlights, she says, really like Scott and Matt, and Matt's reaction of T-Bob speaking eloquently after kissing the Blarney Stone. That car that Matt has to drive is hilariously boxy. Did like the details of him driving on the correct side of the road. Gulliver, I think, was used well for the episode because of Dagger's fear of being hit by the fairy darts. They kind of played on that, which I don't know. That was kind of a stretch too. How did they know that he was afraid?
That's it.
They wouldn't have really known that. Some quibbles, she says. All of this regards the sheep scenes. Too many jokes and bad puns. The wolf fibers and T-Bob saving the day in the water was far too convenient. While I love the scene where M.A.S.K tricks V.E.N.O.M and how they used Spectrum to create the fairy darts, how did Matt and Calhoun sneak in there without Mayhem and Dagger noticing? And then some comments on the two new agents. Julio, I thought at least it looks good on him. Really dated civilian clothing. She says, at least it looks good on him. He's got some really dated clothing. He's probably the worst offender of them all with the rolled up shirt and jacket sleeves. Kind of the Miami Vice look. And she wanted to see Steamer, as I did, or Streamer. Is it Steamer or Streamer? One of those two. Calhoun, I liked his introduction feeding the horses. He also seems a bit cryptic as Bruce with the Mary's Little Land comment. And she thinks he kind of looks like Ant-Man. It's some sort of weird Superman briefs with the top. Anyway, she thought his mask was cool from the front, and the back thought it was more like Blaster 2, which was Hondo's new mask. So she had some up and downs about that, but we appreciate the comment. And again, since it was been a while that we've gone on here and podcasted, we cut a few of the longer, lengthy comments short. So
right.
Hopefully you won't hold that against us, and we'll maybe do some more streamlined comments for the next episode.
Right. And
but anyways,
like I said, we apologize. We've been life has gotten in our way for most of our delay. We hope to be recording this a little bit more frequently than we have. But like Jason said on the beginning of our podcast. I've had tests. We've had family and other things pop up. So, but yeah, we're hoping to do a lot more often.
Yeah, get back on track, and we've got one more episode essentially in the season. Episode 50, the Everglades Odyssey. And this might be a fun one. This is where Matt Tracker is bitten by a venomous snake, and while he recovers, Alex Sector and Scott and T-Bob must lead the M.A.S.K team to stop Venom's plan to steal the NASA space shuttle. So this might be interesting to see Matt out of the picture and what the team can do without him. And if memory serves me correctly, we actually might get T-Bob flying Thunderhawk in this episode. So this should be interesting. I don't know which way it's going to go for me, but
yeah, I guess we'll see.
We'll see how it turns out, and then of course right after we review number 50, we'll do a quick walkthrough overview of season 5, and this is where we go back and give our ratings for each one, and we can kind of see how our overall rating of those 10 episodes stacked up to the 10 episodes of other seasons of MASKast that we've done up to this point. And that's usually fun, and we can get a peek ahead. I might do a little bit more peeking than I've done in the past to the next season, 51 to 60. And then we'll see. Maybe we can get that done this year. If we can get at least a review out each month and maybe double up on a couple months, that could be possible. I think that was kind of the goal that we set, to try to get through episode 60 in 2017. So maybe we can keep on track with that and do some reviewing of the comics and get some of our friends and other fellow fans on the air with us to chat as well as we continue the journey that is MASKast.
That is it. We've had an awesome time, a blast, as I usually say. Wanted to invite you, shameless plug, over to our other entity that we've also delayed for recently. That is Memory Jogger over on rediscoverthe80s.com. You'll learn a little bit more about us and basically what it was like for at least us growing up in the 80s, but not just 80s centric. We're spanning the decades, not just what we lived in, but what we watched in other decades. Like I used the analogy, we grew up with the '66 Batman. That was our thing back in the day. Monsters, Three Stooges.
Yeah.
So, but go ahead and find us on that. Otherwise, I think that wraps it up. So, on behalf of Jason, I am Wyatt, and thank you for listening to MASKast.